The small courthouse in Cedar Springs, Virginia, was unusually crowded that morning. Every bench was filled, and the air buzzed with the kind of tension that only comes when truth and secrets share the same room. The townspeople whispered in low voices, craning their necks for a glimpse of the child who had drawn national attention. Reporters had gathered outside like hungry crows, their cameras waiting for the story that had shocked even seasoned journalists. A 7-year-old girl testifying in a case against a decorated police sergeant. At the front of the room, under the fluttering U.S. flag, sat Judge, her expression grave yet sympathetic. She had seen many trials in her 30-year career, but this one unsettled her. On her docket, it was listed as State of Virginia versus Sergeant Michael, but the reality was much heavier. Behind those formal words lay a tragedy, the death of Officer Daniel Carson, a respected member of the force, husband and father of the little girl everyone was now whispering about. And there, on the witness bench near the front row, sat Lily Carson. She looked impossibly small in the oversized wooden chair. Her legs didn't reach the floor, and she swung them gently, not out of playfulness but nervous energy. She held a faded teddy bear, its fur matted and one button eye missing, the only thing she'd carried into the courtroom. Her hair was tied into a loose braid, though strands had escaped to fall around her pale face. Her wide blue eyes darted between faces, the judge, the lawyers, the rows of strangers staring at her. But what caught her attention most was not the people, it was the dog. A large German shepherd sat near the defense table, obediently at the feet of Sergeant. His coat gleamed under the courtroom lights, and his posture was impeccable, trained, controlled, and alert. His name was Rex. The defense attorney had insisted Rex be allowed in court, arguing he was part of his career and key to proving his innocence. The judge had hesitated at first, but the law permitted it. After all, his defense was built on his service record and his partnership with the dog. But the moment Lily saw Rex, her small fingers froze around the teddy bear's paw, her breathing hitched. Her mother, Carson, sitting beside her, gently touched her arm. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered, though her own voice shook. "It's just for a little while." Just for a little while. The bailiff called the court to order. All rise. Everyone stood as Judge entered, her black robe flowing behind her. The heavy gavel came down once. "Court is now in session," she announced. Her tone was calm, but her eyes lingered briefly on the child. As the formalities ended, the prosecutor, Aaron White, rose to address the court. His voice was steady but measured. "Your Honor, today the state presents its case concerning the events of April 14th, the night Officer Daniel Carson was killed during what was reported as a K-9 training operation gone wrong. Evidence now suggests it was not an accident but a deliberate act to silence him. The only surviving witness, his daughter, Lily Carson, may hold the key to understanding what truly happened." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Everyone knew about the night in question, the night that had divided the police department and the community. At first, it was reported as a tragic mishap, a routine canine exercise gone awry, resulting in a fatal injury. But whispers had followed, unofficial reports, missing footage, contradictory statements, and a frightened little girl who, after that night, hadn't spoken a single word. Now she was here. Across the room, Sergeant sat stiffly, dressed in a navy suit. The man looked like every portrait of authority: clean-cut hair, broad shoulders, calm composure. Years of police service had made him confident under pressure. He glanced occasionally at the jury, his expression carefully neutral. But when his gaze flicked to Lily, there was something else there, something sharp, almost hidden behind politeness. Rex, the dog, sat beside him, panting softly. His leash rested loosely in his gloved hand. The dog's ears perked whenever someone moved or spoke, his loyalty unbroken even now. The defense attorney rose next. Her tone was sympathetic, polished. "Your Honor, while we all grieve Officer Carson's passing, the defense maintains that this tragedy was an unfortunate accident, one that should not destroy the reputation of a man who has served this community with integrity for 20 years. Sargent loved his partner and respected his fallen colleague. The accusations made by the prosecution are unfounded, emotionally charged, and rely on the trauma of a child who tragically lost her father. Lily flinched slightly at the word child. She looked down, tightening her grip on the bear. Her mother leaned closer and whispered again, "You're safe, Lily. Remember, you're safe." The judge called for the first recess before testimony began. As people stood, the murmur in the room grew again. Some whispered sympathy for the child, others whispered doubt. One woman near the back muttered, "They're really letting a little girl testify." Another replied, "If she saw something, she deserves to be heard." Outside, the media swarmed the courthouse steps. Headlines were already forming. Officer's daughter faces her father's alleged killer. Hero dog returns to courtroom as symbol of loyalty. Inside, Lily sat quietly, her eyes never leaving Rex. Something about the dog's calm stare made her chest tighten. It wasn't hatred, it was memory. She remembered flashes, her father's voice calling her name, the metallic click of a weapon, the dog barking once, twice, and then a sound she couldn't forget no matter how hard she tried. She looked at Rex again. His tail moved faintly. His gaze shifted from her to Sargent, then back again, as if he too remembered something. When court resumed, Judge spoke directly to Lily. "Miss Carson, I know this is very difficult for you. You don't have to rush. You just tell us what you remember. You are very brave for being here." Lily didn't respond. Her eyes remained fixed on Rex. The prosecutor approached slowly, kneeling to her level. "Lily," he said gently, "do you remember the night your daddy got hurt?" A hush fell over the room. She blinked, clutching her bear. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. From the defense table, shifted uncomfortably. His attorney touched his arm, silently urging calm. The prosecutor continued softly, "Do you remember who was there?" Lily's eyes flicked toward Rex. Everyone followed her gaze. The dog sat motionless, chest rising and falling steadily. "Do you recognize that dog, Lily?" the prosecutor asked carefully. For a long moment she didn't move. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. A collective intake of breath filled the room. "Can you tell us how you know him?" Her small fingers trembled. She looked down at the bear, then up at the judge, then finally at the dog again. But her voice, her sweet, frightened voice, remained silent. The prosecutor looked at the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a short break. The witness needs time." Judge nodded immediately. "Granted." As the gavel struck, the courtroom exhaled, leaned back, exuding confidence again. To him, her silence meant safety. But what he didn't notice, what only the prosecutor caught, was that Lily's small hand had started to draw invisible lines on the wooden bench with her finger. Shapes only she could see. A dog, a badge, and beneath it something red. The truth was beginning to surface, silently, but powerfully. And everyone in that room would soon realize that this quiet little girl wasn't as powerless as she seemed. The silence of the courtroom wasn't weakness. It was the calm before the storm. The courthouse clock ticked softly, its rhythmic sound filling the silence left after the judge called a short recess. The spectators began whispering again, but this time their tone was different, uncertain, curious, and uneasy. Everyone had just seen something powerful in that little girl's eyes. She hadn't spoken a word, but her nod, that small, trembling acknowledgement of the dog, had shaken the courtroom more than any testimony could have. Lily Carson sat beside her mother, staring blankly at the wooden floor. Her shoes dangled inches above it, polished but scuffed at the toes. Her teddy bear rested in her lap, its worn-out fur streaked with her nervous grip. She had been brave just to nod, her mother had whispered proudly. But bravery had a cost. Inside her, memories began swirling again, half pictures, half sounds, fragments from that night that refused to stay buried. Carson, her mother, leaned close, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "You're doing so well, sweetheart," she murmured softly. "Daddy would be proud of you." Lily didn't reply. Her small hand reached for the edge of her mother's sleeve and clung tightly, as if afraid she might disappear too. Across the courtroom, the defense attorney whispered something to Sargent. He smirked slightly, a faint, controlled smirk that made even his own lawyer uneasy. "She's scared," he muttered under his breath. "Scared kids make bad witnesses." His voice carried the tone of someone who had already convinced himself victory was certain. But the prosecutor, Aaron White, wasn't so sure. He'd seen this kind of case before where fear buried the truth, but only for a while. He watched Lily carefully, noticing how her eyes kept glancing at the dog. Not just fear, there was recognition there. Something lived behind those eyes, a memory struggling to break free. The judge's gavel struck once. "Court will reconvene," she announced. Everyone returned to their seats. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Adjusted his tie, Rex lay silently at his feet, and Lily, that small, fragile witness, prepared to face the hardest moment of her young life. The prosecutor approached the bench once more, his tone gentle. "Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to continue questioning the witness." Judge nodded. "Proceed carefully, Mr. White." He turned back to Lily. "Lily," he began softly, crouching slightly to meet her eyes, "do you remember the night your daddy got hurt?" Lily's lips trembled, but no words came. The courtroom seemed to shrink around her, the walls closer, the air heavier. Her teddy bear slipped slightly, and she caught it just before it fell. Everyone waited. The reporters at the back lowered their cameras, realizing even a single click might break the fragile silence. Her mother whispered, "It's okay, baby, you can tell them." Lily looked up, her eyes meeting the prosecutor. For the first time, he saw something flicker there, a mixture of fear, sorrow, and determination. Slowly, she nodded. The prosecutor smiled kindly. "Good girl, that's very brave of you." He moved a little closer. "Do you remember who was with your daddy that night?" Lily hesitated, then looked across the room at Sargent and Rex. The dog tilted his head, as though sensing the attention. His expression hardened just slightly, the faintest twitch of unease crossing his features. Lily pointed a shaky finger toward the dog, then dropped it just as quickly. Her voice refused to follow. Aaron White straightened and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we'd like to submit into record the drawings made by the witness during her therapy sessions." The defense attorney was quick to stand. "Objection. These are the interpretations of a traumatized child, not factual evidence." Judge leaned forward. "Overruled, let's see them." Aaron nodded to his assistant, who approached with a folder. He removed a series of crayon drawings and displayed them on the screen beside the jury. Gasps echoed softly through the courtroom. Each drawing was simple, childlike, yet haunting. One showed a large dog with red streaks around its muzzle. Another depicted a man in a dark uniform standing over a fallen figure. In the corner of every picture was a small, unevenly drawn badge with numbers that matched Lily's father's police badge number. "These were drawn," the prosecutor explained, "during therapy sessions in the months following Officer Carson's death. Though she hasn't spoken about it, the recurring images suggest a consistent memory." The jurors exchanged uneasy looks. Even the judge shifted slightly in her seat. The defense attorney rose again, visibly tense. "Your Honor, these are children's drawings, nothing more. To imply they represent factual events is emotional manipulation." Aaron responded firmly. "Sometimes the truth is clearer through the eyes of innocence than through polished lies." Murmurs spread through the courtroom until the judge's gavel brought silence again. "The court will allow the drawings into evidence," she ruled, "but we proceed with caution." The prosecutor turned back to Lily. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "did you draw these pictures?" Lily nodded. Her voice still wouldn't come, but her eyes flickered with the faintest glow of understanding. "Why did you draw the dog?" he asked softly. She looked down at her teddy bear, whispering something too quiet to hear. The court reporter strained to catch it. Aaron leaned closer. "Can you say that again, Lily?" She hesitated, then whispered faintly because he was there. The words were barely audible, but they carried across the room like thunder. The entire courtroom went still. Even Judge looked taken aback. Carson covered her mouth, tears instantly flooding her eyes. It was the first time in months she'd heard her daughter's voice. Aaron nodded slowly, his tone now barely a whisper. "That's very brave of you, Lily. You're doing so well." He took a step closer. "Can you tell us what he did?" Lily's small hands began to tremble again. Her eyes darted too. The sergeant's face tightened. His attorney whispered something to him, but he didn't move. Rex lifted his head slightly, his dark eyes watching Lily carefully. And then silence again. Long, unbearable silence. The prosecutor didn't push further. He knew she had reached her limit for the day. "Your Honor," he said, "we'll pause the questioning for now." Judge agreed. "That's enough for today. The court will reconvene tomorrow morning." The gavel struck once, and the room exhaled as though it had been holding its breath. As people began to file out, Sargent stood. For the first time, he looked at Lily not with irritation but with something closer to fear. His mask of calm confidence had cracked, if only slightly. He turned to his attorney. "We need to get that kid off the stand," he muttered. "She's dangerous." His lawyer frowned. "She's a child, Mike." He leaned in closer. "So was she that night. Look what happened." Meanwhile, helped Lily down from the witness chair. Her daughter's small body leaned into her side, exhausted and trembling. As they exited the courtroom, flashes from the reporters' cameras lit up the hallway like lightning. Shielded her daughter as best she could, whispering reassurance. "It's almost over, honey. You did so good today." But in Lily's mind, it was far from over. As they stepped outside, a faint sound of barking echoed from somewhere in the courthouse basement, maybe from a police K-9 training unit. Lily froze. Her breathing quickened. Her teddy bear slipped from her hand and hit the ground. Her mother bent to pick it up. "Lily, what's wrong?" Lily didn't answer. Her lips parted as she stared into the distance, eyes unfocused. For a moment, the image of that night flashed before her again, the flashing red lights, the cold air, and the silhouette of a man shouting a command she'd never forget. And the dog, always the dog, leaping toward her father. Her small voice whispered the same words she'd whispered that terrible night. "Daddy, don't go." Knelt down, tears stinging her eyes. "You're safe now, baby," she whispered. But as she held her daughter, she couldn't help noticing the way Lily's hands shook, not from cold, but from something deeper. Something buried between fear and truth, waiting to surface. Inside the courtroom, Sargent sat alone, staring at the empty witness stand. His jaw tightened as Rex let out a quiet whimper, ears twitching. The sergeant muttered under his breath, "Quiet boy." But Rex didn't obey this time. He kept looking toward the door Lily had walked through, as if he remembered her, and something inside him was starting to remember that night too. And somewhere deep in his instincts, the loyal dog who once followed every command began to question the voice that had once been his master. The courtroom lights dimmed for the evening, but one thing had become clear. The silent witness had finally begun to speak, not through words, but through truth that refused to stay buried any longer. Morning light spilled through the courthouse windows in sharp golden beams, cutting through the lingering dust from yesterday's tense session. Reporters were already gathered at the entrance again, their microphones pointed toward the heavy wooden doors as though the truth itself might step out and grant them an interview. Inside, the courtroom felt colder, quieter. But everyone could sense it. The storm was about to shift. Sergeant Michael entered wearing the same calm expression he had worn for months. His dark suit was pressed, his silver tie pin gleamed, and the faint scent of aftershave hung around him. To an outsider, he looked every bit the composed lawman, a man who had stared danger in the eye and never flinched. Only those who had served under him knew that his composure was a weapon. It was how he survived every interrogation, every accusation, every lie. Rex padded beside him, leash loose, obedient as ever. The German shepherd moved with the confidence of a creature that had been trained to read a heartbeat before an action. His eyes scanned the room once, settling for a moment on the front row, on Lily Carson. The girl stiffened instantly, her fingers clutching her teddy bear, her mother's hand wrapped around hers in silent protection. Judge tapped her gavel once. "The court is in session. Counsel, you may begin." The defense attorney stood with a deliberate calm. Her tone carried the warmth of practiced empathy. "Your Honor, ladies and of the jury, today you will hear from a man who has dedicated 22 years to protecting this community. A man who trained hundreds of officers, led rescues, and risked his life time and again. He has been decorated, respected, and trusted. That man is Sergeant Michael." She gestured toward her client, Rose giving a slight nod to the jurors, a humble hero perfectly cast. "Yesterday," continued, "we saw a frightened child forced to relive an unimaginable tragedy. My heart goes out to her, but tragedy does not equal truth. Children, bless them, can be mistaken. Memories blur, especially when fear is involved. Sergeant did nothing but his duty. The events of that night were a heartbreaking accident, not a crime." Her words flowed smooth as silk. Every sentence sounded like sympathy, every pause like sincerity. Even some in the gallery began to nod along. The prosecutor watched silently, pen tapping against his notes. He had expected this performance. Turned toward, "Sergeant, please tell the court in your own words what happened that night." Adjusted the microphone. "It was supposed to be a simple evening exercise," he began. His voice was steady, authoritative. "Officer Carson and I were working on off-leash response drills with Rex. We'd done it hundreds of times, but that night something spooked him, maybe a sound, maybe a shadow. Rex broke command and charged forward. Before I could pull him back, the weapon discharged. I froze. It all happened so fast." He exhaled, lowering his eyes just enough to seem human. "I wish I could take it back every single day." Nodded sympathetically. "So the incident was a tragic accident?" "Yes, ma'am. I would give anything to undo it." The courtroom stayed still. Even the judge appeared moved for a heartbeat. Then added softly, "I loved Daniel like a brother." In the front row, Carson felt her stomach twist. The lie was so effortless it nearly sounded real. She turned away, tears blurring her vision. Pressed on, "Tell the court about Rex. You've served together for years, haven't you?" "Yes, since he was a pup," said, pride flickering in his voice. "We've been through fires, drug busts, hostage rescues. He's a hero dog, saved my life twice. He never attacks unless commanded or provoked." A murmur spread among the jurors. The image of loyalty between man and dog was powerful. It always was. "Would Rex ever harm an innocent person on his own?" asked. "Never," answered firmly. "He's the most disciplined animal I've ever trained." At that, the German shepherd let out a small, low whine, as if something inside him objected. It was brief, but enough for Lily to flinch. Gave a subtle tug on the leash. Rex instantly fell silent. The moment passed quickly, yet everyone who noticed it felt an unexplainable chill. Aaron White seized the pause. "Your Honor, may I cross-examine?" Judge nodded. "Proceed." White approached slowly, his steps deliberate. "Sergeant, you've that Rex never attacks without command, correct?" "That's right." "And you claim you gave no such command that night?" "I did not." White glanced down at his notes, then back up. "Yet from Officer Carson's vest records a voice, yours issuing a phrase just before the gunshot. Take him. Do you deny saying that?" Stiffened slightly, then recovered. "It's a standard. I was telling Rex to take the position, not to attack." "So take him means take position?" White asked. "In context, yes." The prosecutor smiled faintly. "Context can be interesting, Sergeant, especially when people die because of it." Jumped up, objection argumentative. Sustained, the judge warned. White changed tactics. Sergeant, you said something earlier that caught my attention. You said Rex is a hero dog. Loyal, obedient, disciplined. That's quite a reputation. Yes, sir, he's one of the best. Then explain this. White gestured toward Rex. Why, when the witness, Lily Carson, entered the courtroom yesterday, did your dog begin to shake and lower his head? Was he afraid of a child? Objected again, but White pressed on. Or perhaps he remembered her. The jurors leaned forward. His composure slipped for half a breath. His eyes flicked toward the dog. Rex reacts to stress like anyone, he answered quickly. There were cameras, lights, shouting. He was confused. White circled him slowly. Confused, perhaps, but not mistaken. You trained him, Sergeant. He recognizes guilt. Objection barked. Withdrawn, White said smoothly, though the point had landed. The tension rippled across the room like a cold draft. Knuckles tightened on the table. The confident mask began to show small cracks. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Judge called for a short recess to calm the growing agitation. The gavel struck, chairs scraped, people whispered. As soon as the microphones were off, leaned toward his lawyer. He's fishing, he muttered. He's got nothing. Studied him, you sure? I've got this under control, he said through gritted teeth. But when he looked down at Rex, the dog's eyes were locked on him, unblinking, searching, almost human. Looked away first. Across the aisle, Aaron White gathered his papers. He turned toward Carson and Lily, offering a small nod of reassurance. We're getting there, he whispered. His eyes glistened. She's so scared, she said softly. That man, the way he looks at her. She won't have to face him alone again, White promised. Tomorrow we bring new evidence. As court adjourned for lunch, stepped outside into the sunlight, removing his jacket. The crowd of reporters swarmed. Sergeant, did you hear the prosecutor's claim? Did you order the dog to attack that night? He smiled for the cameras. The truth will speak for itself, he said confidently. Rex and I have nothing to hide. But as the cameras flashed, the dog at his side gave a quiet, uneasy growl. The microphones caught it. The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat before resuming their shouting. Inside, in a quiet corner of the courthouse hallway, Lily sat with her therapist coloring silently while her mother watched over her. The little girl drew again, this time a dog sitting beside a man. Only now she added something new, a small circle around the man's mouth, colored red. When noticed, she asked gently, "What's that, honey?" Lily didn't look up. "The voice," she whispered. Felt her heart drop. What voice? The one that told him to do it. Her mother froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then realized. The defense thought they were playing a game of strategy and optics, but her daughter was remembering details no one else knew. The voice, the words, the command. The next morning, when the trial resumed, Aaron White stood ready with a new recording. The footage had been enhanced overnight by forensic technicians. The sound was clearer now, the command unmistakable. And in that moment, the balance of the game would begin to shift. The defense's polished story would start to crumble, one command at a time. But for now, as Part 3 closes, the courtroom lights dim, the jurors leave, and Rex lies quietly by his master's side, ears twitching, as if haunted by a single phrase that had changed everything. Take him. The night that changed everything began like so many others, quiet, predictable, wrapped in the hum of suburban stillness. The station clock had just struck 9:47 p.m. when Officer Daniel Carson received a call from Sergeant. It wasn't an unusual request. They often trained together after hours, running drills with Rex in the empty park behind the precinct. But that night, Daniel hesitated. His daughter, Lily, had been waiting at home with her stuffed bear and a bedtime story. Still was his superior officer, and loyalty ran deep in Daniel's veins. "Give me 20 minutes, he said, grabbing his jacket. "Then I'll call it a night." By 10:15, the park was shrouded in fog. Streetlights flickered weakly, their glow barely touching the worn training field. Daniel parked beside the chain-link fence, stepping out into the cold. His breath came out in visible clouds as he spotted near the equipment shed, leash in hand. Rex sat beside him, motionless, alert, his eyes reflecting a faint amber light. "Didn't think you'd make it," said with a thin smile. "Wouldn't miss it," Daniel replied, though his tone was cautious. "What's the plan?" Gestured to the field. "Standard off-leash control drills. You take point, I'll release him when you're ready." Daniel nodded, clipping his flashlight to his vest. "Ready when you are." For several minutes it went as usual. Commands, responses, praise. Rex performed flawlessly: heel, sit, search, return. His muscles rippled under the moonlight, a living machine of discipline. Watched, eyes narrowed in silent evaluation. Then something shifted. Stepped closer, voice low. "You ever think about promotion, Dan?" Daniel frowned slightly. "Sure, when the time's right." "The time's right now," said, his voice almost too calm. "But it takes loyalty, real loyalty, you understand." Daniel glanced over, uneasy. "You have it, you know that." Smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Then prove it." Before Daniel could respond, snapped his fingers twice, a signal Rex knew well. The dog tensed immediately, ears up, tail stiff. Daniel's instincts screamed wrong. "Mike, what are you doing?" "Testing something," murmured. "Stand still." Rex began to growl, low and guttural. Daniel's hand went to his holster. "Call him off, now." "Didn't move, take him." The words hung in the air like poison. Rex lunged. Daniel dove sideways, the growl erupting into chaos. The dog's weight hit him full force, teeth snapping inches from his arm. He shouted, rolling, trying to avoid hurting the animal. "Mike, call him off." But didn't, he just watched. "Rex, down," Daniel yelled, desperate. The command faltered. Rex hesitated, confused between two masters. Then came the second gunshot, sharp, echoing through the fog. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Rex whined and staggered back. Daniel's gun was half raised, his face pale, shocked, not by pain but disbelief. A dark patch spread across his uniform. He fell. The gun slipped from his hand and hit the ground with a dull thud. Stood still, smoke curling from his own weapon. "He drew on me," he said under his breath, as if rehearsing the words. "He drew first." Rex whimpered again, crawling toward Daniel's body, nudging his hand. The loyalty that demanded belonged elsewhere, to the man lying still in the dirt. The night air thickened, holstered his weapon, pulling a small radio from his belt. "Officer down, accidental discharge, need medics now." His voice was calm, professional, detached. It sounded like someone reporting a stranger's death. Within minutes, the flashing red and blue lights painted the fog. Officers rushed in, confused, alarmed, shouting questions. Stood nearby, steady as stone, giving the same account he would repeat for months to come. "Accident, the dog got spooked. Carson reached for his gun. I fired to protect myself." But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was that a small pair of eyes had seen everything. Lily had woken up to the sound of sirens. Her mother had fallen asleep on the couch, the TV still on. She pressed her face to the window, curious, innocent. From her bedroom she could see the edge of the park, lit in red and blue. Something inside her told her to go. She crept outside barefoot, the grass damp beneath her feet, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. She followed the sound, the light, until she reached the chain-link fence. Through the gaps, she saw figures moving, her father lying on the ground, the dog beside him, and Sargent standing over them. She didn't understand death, but she understood wrong. The dog looked toward her suddenly, Rex's eyes catching hers. For a moment time bent. The dog didn't bark, didn't move, just stared, his chest heaving. Then turned, saw her small figure behind the fence and froze. "Lily," he said sharply. Her name on his lips sounded strange, like a threat. He started toward her, but another officer called his name, and he turned away. When Carson arrived minutes later, clutching her daughter, was already finishing his report. He spoke gently, rehearsed, with just the right trace of regret. "I'm so sorry, it was an accident." Rex panicked. Daniel tried to calm him, but the gun discharged. Couldn't even speak. Her tears came silently as she cradled her daughter, put a hand on her shoulder. "He was one of the best men I ever served with." Behind him, Rex whimpered again, glanced down and noticed Daniel's vest, torn and punctured by a single entry wound too close to his heart. The angle was wrong. It didn't match the story. But grief blurred reason. She just held her daughter. Lily buried her face against her mother's shoulder, whispering two words so soft no one heard them that night. The voice. Weeks turned into months. The official report was sealed as accidental discharge during canine exercise. The department offered condolences, a folded flag, and a ceremony that felt more like silence than honor. But something about Lily changed. She spoke little, drew constantly, pictures of dogs, men, and the same phrase scrawled in shaky handwriting: "Take him." Didn't understand until months later when Lily spoke those words again, this time in the courtroom, pointing at Rex. That's when it all came flooding back. The fog, the flash, the command. The memory of her father's final look before the gunshot. Back in the present, the sound technician in the courtroom loaded the enhanced audio clip onto the system. As the jury returned, the room buzzed with tension. Sat rigid beside his attorney, jaw tight. Rex lay at his feet, restless, tail flicking nervously. Aaron White approached the judge. "Your Honor, this is a cleaned version of Officer Carson's recording. The original was distorted by environmental noise, but forensic analysis has clarified the spoken command." The judge nodded. "Proceed." White pressed play. The courtroom filled with static, then footsteps, faint breathing. Daniel's voice, "Mike, call him off, now." Then unmistakably, his voice, sharp, deliberate, "Take him." The gunshot followed. For a moment, no one breathed. Even the defense attorney lowered her eyes. The jurors exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from uncertainty to realization. Covered her mouth, trembling. Lily, seated beside her, looked at the dog again, the same sad eyes, the same guilt. And Rex, as if understanding the sound of his master's voice in that recording, began to whine softly, burying his head between his paws. The truth had finally found its way through the fog. The night that began as a training exercise had become the night the mask of loyalty fell, and the courtroom was about to witness what loyalty, betrayal, and memory looked like when the innocent refused to forget. The moment the audio clip ended, silence filled the courtroom like a physical weight. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to disappear. Everyone had heard it, those two words that shattered months of lies: "Take him." Sergeant Michael sat motionless, his hand frozen halfway between the table and his tie. The color drained from his face. The jurors stared at him, and for the first time since the trial began, his polished calm cracked. Rex lay by his chair, eyes downcast, a low whimper trembling in his throat. Aaron White, the prosecutor, broke the silence. "Your Honor, the state moves to admit this enhanced recording as Exhibit 47. It establishes intent, an order to attack, not an accident." The defense attorney rose immediately, her voice sharp. "Objection! The audio is unreliable, manipulated." "Overruled," judge said firmly. "The jury will consider the evidence." Lips tightened. She leaned toward, whispering furiously, "Don't react. Do not let them see fear." But it was too late. The image of the decorated sergeant was already bleeding away. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts. Every headline forming in their minds carried the same message: hero cops lie exposed. White stepped forward again, voice steady but with a glint of righteous fire. "Sergeant, would you like to explain that recording? Perhaps tell the court what 'take him' meant this time?" cleared his throat, his voice trembling slightly. It's been taken out of context. The equipment, sometimes it records things incorrectly." White cut in smoothly. "Are you suggesting they imagined your voice?" Murmurs spread across the courtroom, slammed her palm on the table. Objection badgering the witness. "Sustained," the judge said, "but the damage was already done." White stepped back, giving the jury time to absorb what they'd heard. He didn't need to say another word. Silence was speaking louder than any argument. Carson sat clutching Lily's hand, her heart pounding. Tears welled in her eyes, but not of grief this time, of justice slowly, painfully unfolding. For months, she'd lived under the weight of a lie so polished it almost erased her husband's name. Now, in this quiet moment, truth cut through that darkness like sunlight through smoke. Across the room finally spoke, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "I never wanted anyone hurt. Rex acted on instinct. I tried to stop him." White's gaze was unflinching. "You said the word take him. That's not instinct. That's a command." The jury's eyes locked on again. His knuckles whitened on the table, whispered something to him, but he didn't seem to hear. His eyes had drifted downward to Rex, who refused to look at him. By afternoon, the courthouse had become a pressure cooker. News vans surrounded the steps. Crowds gathered with posters that read "Justice for Officer Carson" and "No one is above the law." Inside, Judge called for a recess. "We'll reconvene at 2:00 p.m. Counsel. Please prepare your closing witnesses." The gavel struck. The sound echoed like the ticking of a countdown. As the courtroom emptied, stood, tugging his sleeve straight, tried to steady him. "Listen to me," she hissed. "We can challenge chain of custody, question the authenticity." He shook his head. "It won't matter. They've already made up their minds." "Then make them doubt again," she said. "You've survived worse." But he didn't answer. His eyes were distant, lost in memory. Rex stood beside him, tail still, ears perked. The dog's stare was unrelenting, quiet judgment in its form. When reached for the leash, Rex took a hesitant step back. It was small, almost invisible, but felt it like a wound. For the first time, his control had slipped, not just in court, but with the only being that had ever obeyed him without question. Down the hall in a side room, and Lily waited with Aaron White. Lily sat cross-legged on a chair, coloring quietly again. Her drawing this time showed a courtroom, a tiny figure of a girl, a judge, a dog, and a man behind bars. Aaron smiled softly. "That's quite a picture, Lily. Who's that?" She looked up, her voice small but sure. "The man who told the dog to be bad." His eyes glistened. "Honey, you've been so brave." Lily nodded, but her next words came in a whisper. "Rex wasn't bad. He didn't want to. I saw his eyes." Aaron exchanged a glance with. Even a child could see what adults had missed. Rex wasn't a monster. He was another victim of command and control. The prosecution had focused on, but now, this simple observation could shift the emotional tide completely. Aaron made a note to mention it later, not as legal evidence but as truth. When court resumed, the atmosphere was electric. The jury filed in, their faces tense, focused. Aaron White stood. "The state calls doctor, animal behavior expert." She took the stand, calm and composed, her credentials impeccable. "Dr. White began, you've reviewed the footage and behavior patterns of the K-9 unit involved in this case. In your expert opinion, did the animal act independently or under command?" "Under direct command," she replied. "The vocal tone used was assertive, dominant, and paired with a specific word take. That's a recognized attack signal in law enforcement K-9 training." "And what about the dog's behavior afterward?" She hesitated briefly. "Avoidance. The dog's posture after the incident, ears low, tail tucked, indicates confusion and distress. It's consistent with an animal forced to act against its instincts." White nodded. "So the dog wasn't aggressive by nature?" "Not at all," she said. "He was obedient to a fault." tried to rattle her on cross-examination, but Doctor stood firm. The jury watched every moment. Each word peeled away another layer of once impenetrable image. When it was turn to take the stand again, his arrogance was gone. His posture slumped slightly, his voice rough around the edges. "Sergeant," White said softly, almost like a confession, "you had everything, a career, medals, a loyal partner. Why did you do it?" His eyes flicked to the audience, too, and Lily. He couldn't hold their gaze for long. "You don't understand. Daniel questioned me, questioned orders. I couldn't have that spread through the ranks. The department runs on respect, discipline." White's tone hardened. "Discipline doesn't mean killing a man, Sergeant. It doesn't mean lying about it for a year." His jaw tightened. For a second he looked ready to argue, but then slowly his shoulders sagged. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," he muttered. "It got out of hand." White stepped closer. "You gave a command that took a life, and now a little girl will never forget those words. You called it loyalty, but it was control." The courtroom was still. Even the judge didn't interrupt. When finally looked down at Rex, the dog met his gaze one last time, then turned his head away. That simple motion broke whatever was left of the man's pride. By the end of the day, the defense was in ruins. The jurors' eyes said everything. The hero cop had fallen from grace, exposed not by a rival officer, not by evidence alone, but by a child's memory and a dog's conscience. Outside, the sun had begun to set, streaking the sky with red and gold. Reporters flooded the steps, shouting questions that would soon echo across every network in the country. Inside knelt beside Lily, whispering, "It's almost over, sweetheart." Lily looked up. "Will the dog be okay?" Aaron smiled faintly. "He will. He'll never be used again for harm. The department's already moving to retire him." Lily smiled just a little. "Good, he can be free now." As the gavel struck for adjournment, was led away in handcuffs. His face was gray, eyes empty, the weight of what he'd done pressing down like a mountain. He didn't resist, didn't speak. For once, the man of command had no words left. Behind him, Rex was led out by a gentle female officer. When he passed by Lily, he paused, tail wagging once hesitantly. She reached out her tiny hand, brushing the air between them. "Good boy," she whispered. Rex gave a quiet whine before disappearing through the side door, leaving behind only the faint jingle of his collar, a sound that felt like closure. Morning arrived behind a curtain of gray clouds, the kind that mute every sound and color. Outside the courthouse, reporters huddled under umbrellas while television crews adjusted tripods slick with drizzle. The trial that had gripped an entire country was drawing to its close. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of coffee and nervous anticipation. Carson sat in the front row again, her hands laced together so tightly her knuckles were white. Beside her, little Lily swung her feet above the floor, clutching the same worn teddy bear. The bear's fur was frayed now, its button-eye loose, but it had carried her through every day of testimony. Aaron White stood near the prosecutor's table, eyes fixed on the empty jury box. He hadn't slept much. All night he'd replayed the evidence, the recording's faltering voice. Justice, he told himself, didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered through exhausted hearts. The courtroom door opened. 12 jurors filed in, faces pale, solemn, unreadable. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge entered, robes swaying, her expression grave but steady. She looked at the jurors, then at the defendant. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" A woman in the front row, the foreperson, rose. Her voice trembled but carried clearly. "We have, Your Honor." She handed a folded sheet to the bailiff, who brought it to the bench. Unfolded the paper slowly, scanning it. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the rain ticking against the windows. Then she read aloud. "On the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant, Sergeant Michael, guilty." A gasp rippled through the room, soft, collective, unstoppable. Closed his eyes. His jaw flexed once, twice, then went still. His attorney placed a hand on his arm, but he didn't move. The words seemed to hang around him like heavy chains. Judge continued, "On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. On the charge of falsifying official reports, guilty." By the time she finished, the gallery had fallen silent again. Even the clicking of cameras had stopped, replaced by the stunned hush of finality. Pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Tears spilled freely, but they were tears of release, not of despair. She turned toward her daughter, who stared wide-eyed at the front of the room. "Mommy," Lily whispered, "does that mean the bad man can't hurt anyone now?" Nodded, her voice breaking. "That's right, baby, he can't hurt anyone again." Aaron White exhaled slowly. Months of effort, every late night, every replay of that haunting recording, had finally found purpose. He didn't smile, it wasn't that kind of victory, but inside, a weight lifted. Daniel Carson's name would no longer be followed by the word accident. Judge's gavel struck once. Sentencing will be scheduled in 2 weeks. The defendant is remanded to custody pending that hearing. 2 deputies approached. He stood, movement stiff, expression unreadable. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, he looked down at the floor rather than the faces that once admired him. The uniformed officers who had once saluted him now averted their eyes. For the first time since the trial began, Rex wasn't at his side. Later that afternoon, in a quieter chamber behind the courthouse, an animal care officer led Rex into the room. His leash was soft, his movements careful, and Lily were waiting there at Judge's request. Rex stopped the moment he saw Lily. His ears perked, tail giving a tentative wag. The officer knelt beside him. "He's been evaluated, ma'am. The department's decided he won't return to service. He'll be transferred to a rehabilitation center. After that, if the family consents, he can be adopted." Blinked through fresh tears. "Adopted?" "Yes, ma'am, he's healthy. He just needs to unlearn command responses to live like a normal dog." Lily stepped forward, voice barely more than a whisper. "Can we keep him, Mommy?" Hesitated. The memories were raw, the uniform, the gun, the nightmares. But when Rex lowered himself onto his belly, crawling closer in cautious submission, she saw not the weapon of a corrupt officer, but a creature that had been used, then discarded. She knelt, resting her palm gently on his head. "We'll see, sweetheart, maybe one day soon." Rex pressed his muzzle against her hand and gave a soft whine, as if he understood. Judge, watching from the doorway, allowed herself the faintest smile before stepping away. That evening, the courthouse steps overflowed with reporters again. Microphones thrust forward, questions flying. "Mr. White, do you think the verdict sends a message to law enforcement nationwide?" "Mrs. Carson, how does it feel to finally get justice?" "What happens to the K-9 now?" Didn't answer. She held Lily's hand and kept walking, through the shouting, through the flashes, through the noise. Was being loaded into a van behind the building. She didn't look back. When they reached the car, Lily tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, it's raining on my bear." Laughed softly through her tears and lifted the little stuffed animal, tucking it beneath her coat. There, safe again. For the first time in a long time, the laughter didn't feel forced. Across the city, in a dim jail cell, sat alone. The silence was thicker than the fog that night in the park. He stared at his hands, at the faint mark where his watch had once been. The echo of his own voice haunted him. Take him. He thought of Rex, the dog that had once obeyed without question, and realized too late that obedience without conscience was a curse. In the corner of the cell, a guard watched quietly. "Tough day, Sergeant," he said, not unkindly. Didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the small square of sky through the barred window, where the rain traced lines like the tally marks of time he couldn't undo. Weeks passed. The trial faded from headlines, replaced by newer stories, newer outrage. Yet in one small home on Maple Street, healing had begun. Returned to work at the library, though she kept her husband's badge framed on her desk. Lily started sleeping through the night again. Sometimes she still woke calling for her father, but now the tears didn't last as long. One Saturday morning, a van pulled into their driveway. The same animal care officer stepped out, holding a leash. "Mrs. Carson," he said, smiling gently, "he's ready." Rex trotted out, fur brushed, eyes bright. His breath caught. The dog hesitated on the porch, then wagged his tail once, uncertain. Lily dropped her cereal spoon and ran to the door. "Rex." He bounded forward, paws thudding on the steps, and Lily threw her arms around his neck. For a moment, his heart clenched, fear, memory, but it melted as she watched her daughter giggle while Rex licked her face. The officer nodded. "He's yours now if you'll have him." Knelt beside them, one hand on her daughter, the other on the dog who had once been the symbol of her nightmare. "Welcome home, Rex," she whispered. The officer handed over a small envelope, Rex's service medal, and a note. "May loyalty find a kinder master." That night the house was quiet except for the crackle of rain against the windows. Lily lay asleep, the teddy bear tucked beside her, Rex curled at the foot of her bed. Stood in the doorway, watching. The ache in her chest was still there, but softer now, threaded with peace. Justice hadn't brought Daniel back, but it had given their daughter something even he would have wanted: safety, truth, and the freedom to dream again. She whispered into the dark, "We did it, Danny." Rex's ears flicked at the sound, and for an instant swore she saw recognition in his eyes, as if he, too, remembered the man who had once been kind to him. The rain eased outside, fatting to a hush. Somewhere in that quiet a chapter closed, not with vengeance but with understanding. The news of conviction had traveled fast, moving through the nation like wildfire. Headlines screamed across television screens and social media feeds. "Officer convicted in fatal K-9 incident. Justice for Daniel Carson. Hero cop exposed as killer." Opinions swirled in millions of living rooms. Outrage, disbelief, and fierce debate about loyalty, law enforcement, and accountability. Yet for Lily Carson, the headlines mattered less than the small, fragile victories that filled their days. The morning after the verdict took her daughter to the park where Daniel had trained. The grass was damp from overnight rain, and the air smelled faintly of earth and wet leaves. Rex bounded alongside them, ears alert, tail wagging cautiously. The dog was different now, not the trained weapon of a corrupt officer, but a living, breathing companion. He nudged Lily gently, as if sensing her still fragile heart, and she giggled for the first time in months. "Rex, come here," Lily called, her voice steady, bright, innocent again. The dog obeyed, sitting beside her and resting his massive head in her lap. Watched, remembering the night that had haunted their lives. She swallowed hard, letting herself feel the weight of relief. For the first time, she didn't feel consumed by anger or grief, just the quiet, heavy satisfaction of truth vindicated. Over the following days, the public debate around the case intensified. Talk shows dissected its actions, legal experts argued over procedural failures, and citizens debated K-9 training protocols nationwide. Some still hailed as a hero misjudged by a single, tragic night. Others called him a cautionary tale of authority misused. Ignored it all. Her focus was Lily, and slowly, the home they had feared would be a place of shadow and sorrow was transforming into a sanctuary. 1 week later, sentencing hearing took place. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Media crews filled every available space. Cameras focused on his face, but the composure he once carried had vanished. He now walked into the room with eyes hollow, shoulders slumped, a man who had spent too long believing his position of power could shield him from consequence. Judge presided with her usual solemnity. "Sergeant Michael," she began, "you were found guilty of second-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and falsifying reports. The court has weighed the facts, the evidence, and your lack of remorse in determining your sentence." Rose briefly, her words measured. "Your Honor, my client has served this community faithfully for over 20 years. I ask for leniency." The judge interjected firmly. The sentence was read aloud: 25 years in a maximum security facility without the possibility of parole for the first 15. The courtroom exhaled collectively. Some nodded with satisfaction, others whispered about the harshness. Lowered his head, letting the handcuffs click into place. Rex, absent from the room as part of his transition to civilian care, would never again be forced into duty under that man's command. At home, and Lily adjusted to their new normal. The first night with Rex fully integrated into the household was quiet. Lily slept soundly, the dog curled protectively around her bed. Sat by the window, sipping tea, watching the moonlight reflect on wet pavement. For months, she had feared sleep, dreams haunted by gunfire, shadows, and the voice that had echoed, "Take him." Now the echoes were gone, the nightmares less frequent. Lily's laughter filled the rooms again, and the bond between her and Rex strengthened by each gentle touch and playful romp. One afternoon, as organized Daniel's old desk, papers, notebooks, badges, and photographs, she came across a letter he had written to Lily before the accident. She unfolded it, hands trembling, and read aloud. "Dear Lily, always be brave, always speak truth, and always know love can guide you when others cannot. Daddy loves you forever." Tears streamed down his face as Lily crawled into her lap, listening silently. The words bridged the past and present, offering closure that no courtroom could entirely provide. Across the country, the trial sparked reforms in police K-9 programs. Departments revisited protocols, training, and accountability. Media outlets highlighted Rex's story, a loyal dog caught between obedience and conscience. Animal rights groups advocated for retirement programs for all working dogs, ensuring they would no longer serve as tools in the hands of someone who might misuse authority. Followed these developments with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Justice hadn't just been personal, it was public, reshaping the system that had once failed her family. Lily, meanwhile, found comfort in storytelling. She would sit with Rex at her side and dictate tales of bravery, fairness, and honesty. Their favorite involved a dog who saved people, not through attack, but through loyalty, intuition, and kindness. Every tale, she insisted, had to end with truth prevailing over fear. One Sunday morning, and Lily walked to the park together. They carried a small, framed picture of Daniel, placing it gently beneath a tree he had loved. Beside it, a plaque commemorated Rex's service and his new role as protector, companion, and friend. Lily knelt beside the tree. "Daddy would like that," she said softly, patting Rex's head. Nodded. "He would, and he'd be proud of you too." For a moment, all three, the mother, the daughter, and the dog, sat quietly, feeling the sun warm their faces. The weight of tragedy remained, but it no longer consumed them. Months later, received a letter from the Department of Justice, acknowledging the Carson case as a precedent for improved K-9 and officer accountability protocols. She pinned the letter to the wall above Daniel's desk. The gesture was small, almost invisible, but it symbolized victory over fear, over corruption, over silence. Lily's drawings evolved too. Gone were the chaotic, red-streaked images of that fateful night. Instead, she drew parks, sunny skis, and happy dogs. In the corner of each picture, she included a small figure of her father, always smiling, always safe, always remembered. And Rex, he thrived. Each day, and Lily saw glimpses of the dog that had been forced to obey, now finally free to follow instinct toward kindness and protection, rather than violence and fear. As the year drew to a close, reflected on everything they had endured, the loss, the lies, the courtroom drama, the national outrage, and the slow path to healing. Justice had been served, but the true victory was personal, the reclamation of life, love, and trust. On a quiet evening, watched Lily toss a ball for Rex in the backyard. The little girl's laughter rang out, the dog's joyful bark echoed alongside it, and for the first time in a long time, allowed herself to hope. Some wounds never fully fade. Some memories never disappear. But love, truth, and loyalty, the very qualities Daniel had instilled in his daughter, could guide them forward. Whispered to the night sky, "We'll be okay, Danny, we'll be okay." Rex nudged her gently, as if to remind her, "Yes, you will." And Lily, she laughed again, the sound pure and unbroken, a promise that even the darkest nights could give way to dawn. Winter had faded, leaving soft green shoots through the city streets. The sun rose gently over the horizon, painting everything gold and amber, a reminder that life, fragile, stubborn, relentless, always found a way to continue. In a small home on Maple Street, Carson awoke to the faint sound of paws skittering across hardwood. Rex, now fully integrated into their lives, had already begun his morning rounds, checking rooms, nudging toys back into place, and ensuring Lily was awake. The dog had transformed from the instrument of tragedy into a guardian of healing, his massive head resting gently against Lily's bed as she stretched and yawned. "Good morning, Rex," Lily whispered, running her fingers through his fur. Smiled from the doorway, clutching her mug of coffee. "Looks like someone's ready for breakfast." It was an ordinary morning, yet ordinary felt miraculous after the chaos of the past year. The trial, the media frenzy, conviction, the reforms, and the endless nights of fear and grief were behind them. For the first time, they could simply breathe. Outside, the world had taken notice of their story. News segments revisited the case, not just the tragedy, but the aftermath. Police departments had instituted stricter K-9 oversight, training reforms, and mandatory psychological assessments for officers working with animals. Lawmakers cited the Carson case as an example of accountability in action. Rex had even become a symbol of change, a living reminder that loyalty must always be tempered by conscience, that obedience is meaningless without morality. Read one article aloud to Lily while they sat on the porch. Rex, the K-9 who witnessed tragedy, now a symbol of hope, a dog that taught a nation the meaning of true loyalty and conscience. Lily's eyes sparkled. "I like that, he's like a superhero." Laughed softly. "Yes, baby, a superhero with 4 paws." Even in their small home, the resonance of their journey reached far beyond their walls. People wrote letters of support, shared gifts for Lily, and sent notes praising Rex's new role as a companion dog. Some stories even highlighted his courage, raising a child alone while fighting a system that had once failed them. One day, as spring fully bloomed, and Lily visited the park where the tragedy had occurred a year earlier, the grass had grown tall and soft. Sunlight danced through the trees. They carried with them a small monument they had prepared, a bench engraved with Daniel's name and a tribute to Rex, recognizing the dog's service and the truth he had silently borne. Lily approached it first, placing her hand on the smooth wood. "Daddy, Rex is safe now," she whispered, "and we're safe too." Knelt beside her. "Yes, baby, we're safe, and we're together, that's what matters." Rex sat nearby, eyes calm, as if understanding the weight of the moment. He lowered his massive head to rest beside the bench, giving Lily a reassuring presence. For the first time, the past didn't feel like a shadow looming over them. It felt like a bridge, leading them to safety, love, and resilience. As the year progressed, Lily flourished in ways hadn't dared to hope. She spoke confidently about her experiences, often reading stories she had written about a courageous dog and a family that overcame impossible odds. Each narrative emphasized truth, fairness, and compassion, lessons she had learned firsthand. At school, she became a quiet leader among her peers, never boasting, but always willing to help, defend, and guide. Teachers noted her empathy and resilience, attributing it to the profound experiences of her young life. Watched from the sidelines, heart swelling with pride. Her daughter had survived fear, grief, and loss, and emerged not broken but brilliant, compassionate, and strong. Meanwhile, Rex adapted fully to his new life. No longer a K-9 in uniform, he became a gentle companion. He attended obedience classes, not for law enforcement but for the joy of learning. Children in the neighborhood adored him, and he tolerated their clumsy hugs and excited shouts with patience and grace. Often joked that he had retired from hero work to take on a new role, protector of childhood and bearer of comfort. The neighborhood came to understand the depth of his story. Children would point at him on the street and whisper, "That's the dog from the news, the brave one." And every time, Rex would tilt his head, ears alert, giving a small, approving wag as though acknowledging the truth of their admiration. Nationally, the case continued to spark conversations. Law enforcement agencies updated training programs. Schools used Rex's story in programs about ethics, responsibility, and empathy. Television specials documented the Carsons' journey, often highlighting Lily's courage and her ability to recall details adults had missed. The little girl who remembered, reporters called her. Rarely spoke on camera. When she did, she emphasized resilience, justice, and the importance of accountability over vengeance. "Our story isn't about hate," she said once. "It's about truth, responsibility, and the hope that others can learn from our experience." Lily sat beside her, listening intently, occasionally nudging Rex, who lay calmly at her feet. One warm evening, as twilight settled over Maple Street and Lily sat on the porch together, Rex nestled between them. The sky glowed in soft shades of pink and orange, a promise of light after darkness. Broke the comfortable silence. "Do you remember the first time we met Rex after everything?" Lily nodded. "I was scared, but he didn't hurt me. He just stayed with me." "Exactly," said. "And that's what matters. Sometimes the people and animals who hurt us aren't bad. They're trapped by choices, fear, or misunderstanding. But those who choose kindness, even after pain, help us heal." Lily leaned against her mother. "He's my best friend now." "Yes," whispered, resting her hand on the dog's head. "And he'll always be." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the family sat quietly, the soft sound of Rex's breathing blending with the evening breeze. The trials of the past year, the trial, the courtroom drama, the national outrage, the fear and grief, felt distant now. What remained was love, resilience, and the bond between a mother, her daughter, and a dog who had silently endured more than most humans could imagine. Later that night, Lily placed her teddy bear beside Rex's bed and whispered into the dark, "Thank you for keeping me safe." Rex thumped his tail in response, eyes soft, a living affirmation of loyalty and trust. Watching from the doorway allowed herself a deep breath. The weight of the past had lifted, not erased, never forgotten, but lifted enough for life to continue. Justice had been served, was behind bars. The dog who had been forced to obey an unjust command had found freedom and purpose, and the Carson family had reclaimed their lives. The story, once shadowed by fear and loss, ended with hope, a testament to courage, truth, and the unbreakable bond between those who love fiercely and those who protect without question. As the house settled into sleep, the city outside glimmered under the night sky. Somewhere beyond the horizon, children laughed, dogs barked, and life moved forward, resilient and beautiful. And inside that small home on Maple Street, the Carson family slept together, knowing that even after darkness, a new dawn always arrives.